allows me to draw 2 new cards. Greed is good.
I play the magic card, Pot of Greed. It allows me to draw 2 cards from my deck.
The magic card, Pot of Greed. Thanks to this card, I can now draw 2 new cards from my deck.
I'll play this, my Pot of Greed. A magic card that allows me to draw 2 more cards from my deck.
I play my Pot of Greed card. Now, I'm able to draw 2 new cards.
Well, looky here. I think my luck is beginning to change now. Pot of Greed lets me draw 2 cards.
First, I'll activate my Pot of Greed card. This allows me to draw 2 more cards.
Now I play the magic card, Pot of Greed, allowing me to draw 2 more cards.
I play this, Pot of Greed. It allows me to draw 2 new cards to refresh my hand. I activate the magic card, Pot of Greed. It allows me to draw 2 more cards.
Pot of Greed! Thanks to the effect of this magic card, I can now draw 2 more cards from my deck. And
Now I activate Pot of Greed, which lets me draw 2 cards.
I activate Pot of Greed, which lets me draw 2 cards.
I'll play a magic card. My Pot of Greed. It lets me draw 2 cards.
Pot of Greed! In the game of Duel Monsters, that lets you draw extra cards.
I have a plan.
Pot of Greed lets me draw 2 cards from my deck.
Next, I activate the magic card, Pot of Greed. Now I can draw 2 more cards.
Now, I activate my Pot of Greed magic card, so I can draw 2 cards.
Then I'll activate my Pot of Greed. This lets me draw 2 cards.
First, I'll play my Pot of Greed magic card, letting me draw twice.
I'll begin by activating my Pot of Greed. This lets me draw 2 more cards.
First, I'll play a magic card known as Pot of Greed. So I draw 2 cards.
I play Pot of Greed.
You know what that means, don't you? I can draw 2 additional cards from my deck.
I activate my Pot of Greed magic card. Now I can draw 2 more cards from my deck.
Second, I activate Pot of Greed, which lets me draw 2 more cards from my deck.
First, I activate my Pot of Greed magic card. That lets me draw 2 more cards.
Yeah. I activate the magic card, Pot of Greed. That lets me draw 2 cards from my deck.
I'll start with this. The magic card, Pot of Greed. This allows me to draw 2 more cards from my deck.
What do you know? It's the same card you drew. Some might call that a coincidence, but I call it fate. And thanks to Pot of Greed, I can draw 2 cards.
I'll begin my turn by activating the magic card, Pot of Greed. That allows me to draw 2 more cards from my deck. Now, I'll start by activating the magic card, Pot of Greed, which lets me draw 2 more cards from my deck.
But I'm not done yet. Next, I play Pot of Greed. This allows me to take 2 cards from my deck and add them to my hand.
I'll start by activating Pot of Greed. And you know what that means. I get to draw 2 new cards.